Hey guys, my name is Aaron from Geeky Development and welcome to our Xcode tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating our very own image gallery application from using collection views within the Swift language. Now before we jump straight into this, if you enjoy this tutorial and want to further your knowledge and learning ability, why not enroll in one of the many courses we have available on iOS development. All links for these will be down below in the description. But let's jump straight in to the tutorial. Now we're going to be creating our very own fully featured collection view application known as Big Cats. What we're going to do is have our collection view display a bunch of big wild cats that you see, like lions and tigers and leopards, in a big collection view, and then our users can select from one of the animals on offer and it will push them to a detail view where they can learn more about that animal. Stuff like the name of it, their lifespan, a little bit of a description and other fun stuff that kids will love in this very informative information application. Now, we've already previously learned about how we can populate UI collection views in the course by using an arrays. In this lecture and the next coming ones, we're not going to be using an arrays to populate our collection view. What we're going to be using is a plist. This gives us the ability to have more information upon the selected cell to go on to populate the various objects we're going to have within our detail view. Now, what we're going to do in this lecture is we're going to mainly focus on setting up our collection view and populating it with information and creating our plist as we progress through the next coming lectures as we fully featured and get this set up to where we want it to be. So what we're going to do in this lecture is first start with creating our collection view. We're going to first go to our view control.swift here because this is the default class that gets created to control our UI view controller, and we're going to simply delete it. Because we don't need it, we're going to create our very own brand new one. And if I jump into our main.storyboard, we're also going to delete, if I zoom out a little bit, the UI view controller. We don't need any of these. Again, that's what gets predetermined and set up within our applications when we create our first project for the first time. So what we want to do then is we want to add in a UI collection view controller, as that's going to be the starting point of this application. And to do that, we go straight up to our library at the very top. We're going to scroll down a little bit now where we find our collection view controller, and we're going to drag and drop that in. So it looks very similar to what we've just deleted. The only difference is it has a collection view cell inside, and the whole configurations for it are completely different as well. Now the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to select this and we're going to embed it inside of a navigation controller. That will give us the ability to use the navigation bar to, in the future, be able to select the cell and push to a detail view. The reason we're doing it now is so we can get the configurations all set up and the interface all set up so it looks good, pretty much ready for when we progress into those lectures. So what we're going to do then is once you get it selected, go down to our embed option at the bottom and then select navigation controller. And that will place that view directly inside of our navigation controller. So then it gives us that navigation bar at the top. Now straight away within our application, you'll notice we've got two warnings within our project. One of them is down to the fact that we originally deleted our original UI view controller. So the project and the application now doesn't understand and know what view it should load up first when it builds and runs. So we need to tell it out of these two views, what's going to be the one it loads up. So select our navigation controller here, go to our attributes inspector, and all the way down to view controller, select is initial view controller. So make sure that is ticked. And what that does then is not only gives it a little arrow pointing to the left hand side of that navigation view controller there, it basically telling that view there that this is the first one we want to load up when the application builds and runs. And because our collection view is embedded inside of it, it will display our collection view because that's what's inside of our navigation controller. And that gets rid of our first warning for the time being. Now the second warning is down to the actual cell within our collection view. Because we're using a cell, we need to use what's known as a reusable identifier. So select the cell itself within our collection view, and within attributes inspector, we can add an identifier here, and we'll simply type in cell. There we go, and press enter. This is because we can have multiple cells and we can reference multiple ones of them within the code. And this gives us the ability to identify and single out the individual cell so we can perform and do pretty much what we want to it. So by adding identifier to it, it just removes that warning. The warnings aren't a big issue, they won't crash the project, well this one anyway. It's just more the fact that telling you that you need to add it in, so when it comes to the code, you can reference and tell it what you want it to do. So we've got both of those warnings out the way then. What's next we need to tick off our list to configuring this application, or the basis of it first, is we deleted our viewController.swift, so we now have no classes to be able to control the view. Now we need to create two brand new classes to be able to control it, one for the collection view itself, and then a second one for the collection view cell. This is so we can add objects to it, reference it, and tell it how to display and where to display it in the actual application. So we're going to add these two classes in now. We're going to go to our project, our folder at the top here. We're going to right click it and we're going to go to add a new file. So within here, we're going to select a Cocoa Touch class and change the subclass here from a UI view controller all the way to a UI collection view controller. And I'll leave the name there because we're not adding in multiple ones, so I don't need to change the name. We're going to leave it as it is and press next and generate that into our project. I'm going to repeat the process once more. And this time, rather than add a subclass of a UI collection view controller, we're going to add a subclass of a UI collection view cell. That's the second one that we need in. We'll keep the name the same, press next, and generate that also within our project. So now we've got both of these added in, these brand new classes. I'm going to drag and drop them underneath our app delegate, pretty much where our viewController.swift was before. And then we're going to jump into our main.storyboard and we're going to hook up these two brand new classes to where they need to be so we can reference them and set up the code to control what we want them to do. So the first one we'll focus on then is our collection view controller.swift, and this gets hooked up to the whole view itself here. So select the files owner of that individual view. Make sure we're on the identity inspector, and within our custom class here, we're going to add in the name of it, which happens to be collection view controller, and press enter. So that class is now hooked up to this view, so when we come to adding in objects and coding and telling it what to do, we reference it within that individual class. Now we need to do the collection view cell, and that's pretty much the same. This time we select the cell itself, and then in the identity inspector, add in our collection view cell and press enter. So that is also now hooked up to it too. So eventually we're going to set up an image view within our cell and then reference it to be populated with a bunch of different images. Now before we get onto all of this then, let's talk about the images themselves. Attached to this lecture in the downloadable section, there is a resource file where not only can you get the full source code for this project, but you can also get all the images that we're going to be using, which just happen to be 5 individual images of some big cats we're going to be displaying within this application. We've got cheetahs, jaguars, leopards, lions, and tigers, and we're going to be importing these into our project and get them to be displayed within our collection view. So if you want to use these ones, simply go to the downloadable resource section and download it, or alternatively, you can simply use your own images. It really doesn't matter. It's entirely up to you. If you're going for a different theme and different kind of look altogether, then you might want to use your own images. Maybe you can, be it to landmarks, cities around the world, cars, whatever it may be. The opportunities are pretty much endless. So select them all, go to our assets folder here. And I'm going to simply drag and drop them in, so our project is now aware of them. We can reference them a little bit later within our project. So now we got those in, we're going to jump straight into our main.storyboard. Now I'll zoom in again now. We're going to set up this cell pretty much all ready to start displaying these images. So what we'll do then, we'll resize the cell, make it a little bit bigger so we can clearly see it. There we go. I'm going to bring up our library and I'm going to add in now a simple image view. So select the image view, drag and drop it in, and make sure it goes inside of our actual cell. You know it will do because the cell goes blue. Drag and drop that in. We're going to centralize the image view and make it fit all the edges, because this is pretty much all I really want within the actual cell itself. And we'll go down to our pin options and pin it to all the edges around. So if the cell ever resizes, which it will do eventually when we go to building and running on different screen sizes, the actual image view will also resize and add in those 4 constraints. So now they're in then, I'm actually going to go to the attributes inspector of the cell, or the image itself, sorry, and add in our first image, just so I can kind of simulate what it would kind of look like. I'll change the content mode from scale to fit to, let's go to aspect fill. Just so it kind of spreads it out a bit. And as always, if you ever use this mode, make sure you always clip to bounds. And that's pretty much how it's going to display. So before we populate all of the collection view with all the individual images, I'm going to simulate what it's going to look like if I had in 5 cells. So let's zoom out slightly a little bit now. So let's select the cell itself and simply press Command C to copy it and paste it by pressing Command V till we've got 5 all together. Now don't worry, we will be deleting these. By doing this, it have got a warning in the project, but what I'm doing is simulating to our collection view if 5 cells are inside of it. This is so if I select the collection view itself and go to the size inspector, I can then change the kind of stats of the sizes to reposition to kind of simulate how it would look like and how I want it to look like. So for example then, the cell size here is at 206. I could change this to 170 in terms of its width and its height to be 125. And you can see how the cells change inside, but I'm still not happy with it. I want them not to be touching the edges. I want equal spacing between them. So what I could do is add in some section insets here. So at the very top here, if I add in 10, it kind of pushes it down 10 from the top of the bar. We do the same for the bottom, the left and the right. Add them in there, and that's what it would look like if I simulated it to have the 5 images in. It's pretty cool, isn't it? How we could set something like that up. So that's kind of how it would look like, and I'm pretty much happy with it for the most part, but as of right now, it only really looks good on the iPhone 8 simulator. Because if I was to go and resize it, for example on the iPhone 8 Plus, you can now see how it looks a little bit weird. Don't worry about too much about the images moving, but you can tell there's a big gap in between. And in the next coming lectures anyway, we will be talking about how we can adjust the cell sizes for different screen sizes. But for the most part, that's how it's going to look. That's simply how we can adjust the spacing and stuff. It even has minimum spacing between the cells and the lines, which I can like increase and like decrease, which we'll keep as it is. It's pretty much fine. Get rid of our little bottom section there. And what I'll do now then is select all them cells that I just added in, delete them, so we're back to our original one. That removes that warning there. So it's just a great way to kind of quickly paste them in, just to kind of simulate how it would look like, so you can set up the interface and the spacing just to get it perfect before we do build and run. So now we're pretty much happy with how it is from the kind of offset there. We need to create an outlet for the actual image view itself within the cell, so we can reference it to be populated with the 5 individual images when we build and run. So select the cell itself. I'll get rid of our little side panel there and bring up our assistant editor. And make sure that our class in the assistant editor here is loaded up to our collection view cell. If it's not, go to the top here, go to automatic, run through the project until you can find it, which is our collection view cell there. Space out the outlet section. Select on the actual image view itself, right click or control click and drag that over. And I'll simply call it our cell image view and connect that up. Perfect. So that's all we need to do in that class for now. That's the only reason we have that class, is so we can reference the kind of outlet there for our image view. It's just a way to have it a custom cell, so it's not kind of boring and standard. We can add more stuff to it. You can even add it in labels and text just to get more information being displayed within the actual cell itself. So now we've done that, then we'll close our assistant editor because we're pretty much to the point where we're ready to populate the actual collection view with all of our information. But we don't have the information just yet to populate it. And we're actually going to be populating it with a plist, a property list. And we still haven't created that just yet. So we're going to get our property list all set up now, which is going to house all the information of each of the individual animals within our basically our project. So right click on the project folder at the top again and go to new file. And we're now going to scroll down to where we can add in our property list, which is in our resource section here. There we go. And I simply call it big cats, because they're not little cats. They're not domestic. They're big wild animals. And I'll create that property list now. And now that's generated underneath our info.plist. So we change a little bit of the configuration to get it all set up then. So the first thing I want to do is change this, our plist here, to be an array. So by default it's on dictionary. I'll change it to an array. So we can have an array of different items inside of it. So we press the little plus symbol now, which adds in a brand new item, which we're going to change the item to become now a dictionary, because the item is going to have multiple bits of information inside of it. So if I just quickly drag in, let's do 4 together to begin with. So one item is one cat. We're going to have something like the name of the cat. We're going to have the image of the cat. We could do something like, let's go for, the best option to do is, I've actually got like a huge kind of on the internet right now, a bunch of tabs for all the different individual information of these animals. So you can see here we got like the speed, mass, height and stuff like that. Which one kind of runs very parallel through it? We got mass, lifespan could be a good one. We could go for lifespan for each of the animals. So we've got name, image. We could go lifespan. And then we can do something like a description. Let's go for like a description so we can have more information about said animal. So we've got 4 strings set up here. And each one of these, I'm going to simply copy it and go to our root here and paste it in, because we need 5 all together. So it starts at 0, ends at 4. That's 5 all together. And we need to add information for each of these. So our first item, item 0, is going to be, for example, our cheetah. So we get the information here, the name of it. Simply double click here and paste in the name of our cheetah. And then when it comes to the image then, the actual image is called cheetah.jpg. Now I don't need to add in the .jpg, so in the image I can just simply put in cheetah. For the lifespan of a cheetah, I actually think this is the only one where it doesn't show the lifespan. So if I bring up the Wikipedia page quickly right now, and will it show us the lifespan of a cheetah? I don't think it's going to. I'm just trying to quickly read through it. If not, cheetah lifespan. There we go. We'll quickly get the information up now. So it says in captivity 10 to 12 years, but can live as long as 20 years. I'll just take the 10 to 12 years now. I'm not really too worried about it being super accurate. It's just to get it populated with the information. So we've got that in there then. The next one then, if I quickly go back to that original document, it does have a small little description. We'll just quickly take this here. There we go. And then we'll place that inside of the description. So that's what we pretty much want to do for each of these. We're going to have the rest of the animals now added in, which I'll go through it quickly now. I won't let you sit here and watch me add the other 4 animals in with all their individual informations. But pretty much that's what we want to do. We've got an item. For example, item 0 is linked to the cheetah. It has 4 bits of information in each item, which is what we're going to use to populate the whole of the application. We're going to be using this. The collection view itself is only going to be referencing the image from each item, but then our detail view is going to have a bunch of images, not a bunch of images, sorry, a bunch of objects, which is going to reference the rest of them. That's how we dive deeper to learn more about these specific animals within the application. So I'll get the other 4 now all set up, and then we'll get the ability then to start populating our collection view with all of our images. Okay then, so now I've got the remainder of all the information for the other big cats within our plist. We now have it all populated. We're ready to start reference it to use this information to determine what happens within our app. So what we're going to do now then is we actually get the collection view to populate with the actual images. That's how it's going to work. So we need to set the ability up to read from our plist and then populate our kind of cell with that information. So we're going to jump straight into our collection view.swift. And the first thing we're going to do then is within the actual view did load here, we need to delete this registered class because we're going to set up our very own a little bit further down. So we've got rid of that for the time being then. Just after where we normally place in our actions and outlets, or outlet should I say, we need to create a variable which is going to be simply linked up to the items set up as a string to display within the application, the ability to read it from our plist. So we're simply going to create a variable, and I simply call it here items. And that's going to go into equal our 2 brackets here of a string linked over to a string. Then we end up with 2 brackets there, and then our 2 rounded brackets. Then we're going to create a simple function just after that, before our view did load. And we type in function, which is short for function, which is going to load simply our plist. We'll simply call it load plist. That's where we get the information from. So when it all to pretty much happen before the view loads up anyway. And we need to link this, do dash with the more than symbol to what we set up above, the same formatting, string, colon, string, end that with the 2 brackets there, and create our parentheses and press enter. So this will give us the ability to read from it in a string format, because that's what all the information is pretty much set up to be. And again, it's set up as a dictionary, so we have to do the string colon string in the dictionary format. We're going to create our let because we first need to allocate where this plist is within our property. So we name it a path, and that's going to be equaled to the bundle of our project. We do .main, then we do .path. for the resource there, and the highlighted section is the name of our plist class, which is called Big Cats. That's why we simply named it. And the type here, it's of course a plist. That's the type of the file it is known as. Then we need to return it as an NS array so we can hook up the contents of the class with the URL of the path and linking it to our string. Now we got a little warning at the moment, and that's simply because one, we're not referencing path, and we're missing the return function expected to be our string. So we simply type in return, and what we're returning then is a capital NS array dot, we do init, and we need the init with the contents of, which is just down below here. So the contents of our URL is happen to be uppercase URL dot init, and we need the one that has the file with file URL with our path there, and that's going to be linking to the path we created just up above with our exclamation mark. We end that there with the 2 brackets space as exclamation mark, and then that little function we created earlier, our string colon string, and out of the bracket. It needs to be 2 brackets around it, sorry. So pull this back here. Oh, I've done the wrong bracket at the end. Oh, I've done the wrong bracket there too. There we go. 2 square brackets at the end there. Now it gives the ability to reference our Big Cats class and then go on to populate it within the application. Now, when the view first loads up here, if I get rid of our spacing, as we don't really need that space in there. When the view first loads up, we need to call this function because at the moment it doesn't really do anything unless it's called upon. So as soon as the view loads up, we call upon our self.items, which is the name of the variable we created, and we equal that to our load plist function up above, which then means our items, if we reference that throughout the rest of our application, is linked to all the information within our plist. So now we need to set up the rest of the configuration for our collection view. So the first one we're going to focus on is the number of sections in our collection view. We want to return this to the value of 1. We only have 1 section, which is going to show all of our images. Then we move on to the number of items in the section. So this is how many items display in our 1 section, which this is basically going to be linked to how many entries we have within our plist. So we return this, quite interestingly, to self.items.count. Now the items is linking back to our plist. So if we ever took away or added more information inside of our plist, we don't have to update this line of code because it's always dynamic. It's always reading how many entries are inside of it, and that equals to how many sections it needs to display. Or should I say how many items within our section it needs to display. And then we move on to this little section here, are basically the ability to now cell for item at index path, which is how we configure our cell to display the data inside of it. So I space out this little section here because we need to edit this line of code, which is really, really important. So it creates a let here known as our cell and equals it to our collection view for a reusable cell with identifier. Now we gave our cell an identifier, if you can remember, which happened to be just simply cell. And then for our index path here, we need to link it to the class that it's linked to. So we do as exclamation mark our collection view cell. So by doing that, it enables us to kind of individually seek out that one cell that we're using with the identifier, hook it up to the class that it's been linked to, so then we can go into reference as we configure the cell here, before we return it, the object inside of it, which happens to be our image view. So if I reference the cell let we created, or what was pre-generated for us up above, then do dot, I can then reference the cell image inside of it, which is what we want to simply use. And what we're going to get this to simply set up and be linked to is have our background image simply equal the background or kind of the image of our plist for each of the entries of our big cats. So what we'll do then is get our dot image and equal it to our UI image function, bracket, named, and then place in our image here. But we don't really know what image it is, and the problem we're going to have is the fact that because each of our items for our plist there of our big cats has 4 individual strings inside of it, we need to single out the string that we want, and the string that we want happens to be the one that's linked to our image. So just before we configure that then, we actually go back up and add in a brand new line. We create a let and we'll simply call it item, as we want to single out an individual item. And that's going to simply equal to our self.items, which is what's linked to our plist. Then we do our bracket for our index path dot row. So that enables us to kind of populate all 4 of them and then single out an individual one. So the one we want within our string happens to be then our item, which is now the let up above, and then we do simply our bracket with the name of the string. So if I quickly jump back into our bigcats.plist, the one that we want is named image with a capital I. So back in our collection view here, we type in our image with a capital I and simply close all that up there. That means it's only going to reference, which at the moment it needs to be a string, obviously. And we're missing our little optional wrap there just after it. So that gives the ability to only reference that one line of information out of the 4 within each of the items that we've now created. And that's what gets populated inside of our image view. So we haven't built a run yet. We've actually added in quite a lot without testing it. So this will be the first time we test it. And hopefully it runs smooth first time. We shouldn't have any issues. There's nothing we've changed too dramatically. But we just now wait for the iPhone X simulator to load up. And what that should do then is have our collection view populated with our 5 individual cats solely using the images. And there you go. It loads up straight away. So it doesn't look beautiful, it doesn't look amazing, but the functionality is pretty much there, as you can now see. We've got our 5 individual cats now being displayed, and the most important part I want to take from this is that our collection view is only displaying the images, because that's what we reference it to be. If I change that to anything else, it will reference something else. If I change it to description, it will try and display the description in the image view, which it wouldn't really work because the description's text, and there's no image referencing around it. But that's the most important part we take from it. We can't scroll up and down because it only enables us to scroll once we have more images being displayed outside of the view. But the functionality is there. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So let's take this a little step further. Let's add a few little finishing touches before we move on to the next lecture. The first one we're going to do then is scroll to the very top of our view did load. So just after it calls upon to load our plist, we'll do self.navigationItem.title to go on to equal a string. We could say something like big cats. So if I build and run now then, we should have a title and a navigation bar that now says big cats. We'll also add some styling features too as well. We'll change the navigation bar color. So it says big cats at the top there, which looks pretty cool. Let's jump into our main.storyboard. Get rid of our debug area and bring up our side panel. Zoom out slightly. So select the navigation kind of bar at the top here, or navigation controller should I say. In the attributes inspector, navigation bar just there. There we go. We're going to change it now from being translucent, so it's a solid opaque navigation bar. We'll change the color of it too, which it should be our bar tint here. Why don't we go for this nice little offset red? It looks really cool. And then we'll change the tint of the objects inside, meaning the title and all buttons, from that blue default to white. We'll change the title color too to white as well. And let's build and run and see exactly how now this would look within our application. So we've done a few little different configurations there then. So as it builds and runs then, and it loads up. So it's that nice little orange. It says big cats. Why don't we change the actual font too? And then we'll change the status bar to be white as well. So we get this nice little theme running through the actual application. So the actual font then, you can see here, we did the title color to white. We'll change the font quickly now. We'll go custom. Well, weirdly, we have to change the system to then go back to custom, which is very weird. Very weird indeed. Style, which is now not allowed. Oh, no, we didn't go back to custom. There we go. And then let's go to one of my favorites, Avenue. And we'll go for, let's go for heavy and change it up a little bit to about 24. There we go. Let's see how that would look within our navigation bar now. Now you won't really see much of this take effect until we do switch to a new view controller anyway, but it says big cats, nice and big, and let's change the status bar to white to fit in with the rest of the theme, and then we're ready to jump into our next lecture. So go to the project name at the top as an overall, get rid of our debug area. We need to get down to our deployment info here and change the status bar style from default to light, which is the white version. And then we need to remove our status UI view controller status bar appearance. So we jump into our info.plist. Go to add in a brand new line and type in capital V for view controller based status bar appearance and have the boolean return no. So now when we build and run, those both working together in Unity gives us that white status bar appearance. Pretty cool, isn't it? So again, it's not the most majestic application, it's not the most beautiful design, but we're slowly getting there. We are now slowly getting there with our application. So what we're doing then in the next lecture is we're going to actually set up the ability to have our cells resized, because at the moment they only look really good on the iPhone X, and I believe also the iPhone 8. They're very similar widths anyway, but if I went to build them on a smaller device or a larger device, the cells don't resize and we can't use constraints. We have to manually code it, which we'll get that all set up within our next lecture.